Welcome everyone to the Bonner Institute Fireside Chat with Dominique Shelton Leipzig of Global Data Innovation. I would like to note Dominique is absolutely an expert in AI governance, AI business strategy. And before I ask Dominique to give her bio, because I'll never be able to do justice to it, I want to state a way that Dominique made an impact on my career before I ever knew her or met her. So I recently earned the IAPP AIGP, that's the Artificial Intelligence Governance Professional Certification from the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And Dominique was on the advisory board for the purposes of developing that exam. And of course, Dominique has that certification. Dominique, welcome. Can you tell us about how you got into AI and how you became aware of the 13 concerns that are top of mind for board members?
Thank you, John, so much. And congratulations on passing the AIGP exam. It's a testament to your study of this important area, and it's a hard exam.
Yes,
Uh,
it is. Yes, it is.
so congratulations there. In hindsight, it looks like everything was sort of planned and made a lot of sense. And when you look at it in the rear view mirror, but actually, my career was it makes sense now, but at the beginning, maybe didn't. I my undergraduate degrees were not in tech. I was international relations and French civilization at Brown University. Graduated in 1988, where the old Apple PCs were just coming out, and then went on to law school at Georgetown and graduated in 1991 with a focus on international relations. The international component of Georgetown is what really attracted to me. I
Yes.
I thought that international law is where I would end up, but I also really loved litigation. And back then, it's changed now because of international arbitrations. But back then, if you wanted to litigate and be in international law, you were looking at international public law, kind of like
Mm,
what Amal Clooney does, going into The Hague. And back then, it was Rwanda and a lot of things. So there was that fork in the road or work for a big law firm. And so I thought it would be best for me to do get the initial training and go to a big law firm. That
yes.
turned into a 34-year career in big law. And about 10 years, no, actually about 7 years after practice, I went to a boutique firm in 1998 that did a lot of work because one of our alums left the firm and went to a startup back then, which was Yahoo. And back then in 1998, Yahoo had acquired GeoCities. There was
Mm,
a lot of privacy litigation investigations all around the world, but in the US, the Federal Trade Commission, multiple state AGs, and a number of class actions. So all of us in this tiny boutique, 70 attorneys in San Francisco and in Los Angeles together, really accompanied that client through that
wow.
groundbreaking litigation. Um, After we got that put to bed on the privacy related issues and really worked with them on their first privacy policy, that was before the California Privacy Protection Act required the in 2023 to include in 2003 to include a privacy policy. So we looked at that document as litigation avoidance, prevention, protective
Mm,
blanket for the client. Now it's
mm,
standardized everywhere, but this was before it became required. Then we got into data security and, confronting those issues for not just that client, but multiple others.
mm,
And I remember in 2001, John, distinctly talking with a privacy legal counterpart in a company and an IT manager. There weren't chief information security officers back then. But what struck me is we knew exactly what steps, there were about six of them, that companies needed to take to become resilient to cyber attacks.
yes.
And I remember distinctly thinking these are so straightforward, things like an actionable data inventory, real-time data inventory, so you know where the critical assets are and you can go protect them in advance. In any event, there were six very straightforward things, and I thought for sure that someone was sharing that straightforward information with our CEO and board community. It wasn't me. I was talking to, privacy, legal, and IT managers and helping them de-risk. But I just thought for sure our leaders had this information. And John, I know you can appreciate this when we
Yes.
think
Mhm.
to the past 10 years that cybercrime has cost our global economy $60 trillion. That's
Amazing.
a T, over
Yeah.
double the gross domestic product of the
Mhm.
United States.
Yeah.
We certainly realize that we must uh, say something when we see something now. So, um, AI, after representing the CEO of the California Chamber of Commerce in 2019, when we were negotiating the business-friendly terms into the California Consumer Privacy Act, we dealt with automated decision-making, which is correlated to AI during those negotiations. And of
Right.
course, 2019 was California's chatbot disclosure law. So we were de-risking global companies on AI back then. And of course, in 2018, GDPR, May 2018, GDPR went into effect, and a lot of discussion and assisting clients with dealing with the privacy impacts as it related to training data for AI and so forth. Um, Fast forward to enterprise AI becoming a topic of discussion starting late 2022. I started my digital trust summit then to bring in CEOs and board members together to start grappling with issues.
Yes.
And I wrote my fourth book, which is called Trust, Responsible AI, Innovation, Privacy, and Data Leadership. And to try to get ahead of this so that
Yes.
don't see perennial losses happening to our companies. But you and I were just talking offline. Uh,
Yes.
Infosys just came out with their study last week. 1,500 companies that were interviewed, 95% of them have already experienced AI incidents. Uh,
Yeah.
and those incidents have collectively cost about $1.2 billion. So that's why I'm so passionate about us
Yes.
getting these questions answered for our CEO and board
Yes.
community and preventing these harms because they are preventable to business.
Yes. Well, in the 1990s and throughout my career, I worked with deterministic AI. And deterministic AI was just a line item on a budget sheet that a board might look at. But the board and corporate officers really did not have to have concerns. It was an IT concern. And what's so very interesting today is now boards, through their fiduciary duties in publicly held companies, must pay attention to AI governance because AI is so essential to the business. So I'd like to talk about the 13 concerns, urgent and recurring themes that have emerged from the leaders. And Dominique, if I'm correct, you have trained more than 50,000 board members. So you have a lot of data to pull from. So that's very exciting. And I'd like to ask, and by the way, Kyle David just asked a question. I'd like to acknowledge it. Kyle was asking if someone could share that report. Kyle, offline, I will make sure that all participants receive this report. And by the way, Kyle David is also an AI expert and teaches a class for helping students prepare for the AIGP, which I took. And thank you, Kyle David. Dominique, the first concern is AI governance for agentic AI. I'm actually doing a panel presentation on agentic AI and leadership at ISC2. So I'm very passionate about this topic. Can you discuss what you're learning from your 50,000 plus board members about AI governance and agentic AI as a concern?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. It trained over 50,000 professionals, and a lot of these questions that have come up came up last month when we were in the midst of training over 300 CEOs and board members in 6 states in the U.S. And there were some common themes. Agentic AI was on the top of everybody's mind,
Yes.
thinking about how can governance be achieved? When you think of governance, you're thinking of something static, but agentic AI means that the AI is going to be completing tasks that
Yeah.
might be outside of your company's ecosystem. They're going out on the internet and performing research or performing tasks from various locations, and you're setting them on the path. So the good news is that we can have observability on our
Yeah.
agents and we can exercise governance. And I just want to take an opportunity to explain the trust framework because
Mhm.
it actually works for agentic AI as well as deterministic and machine learning, as well as generative AI.
Yes.
So let's take a step back and just take a moment to say, how can you observe your agents? Well, it is very important for boards to ask the question, how are we validating and auditing what our agents are doing?
Hmm.
Because the agentic AI often is built on top of generative AI.
Hmm.
And generative AI is built on top of the entire internet. And as we know, there are a number of inaccuracies in the
Um,
entire internet. Uh,
yes.
I was struck by reading the model transparency cards for our AI tool makers,
Mhm.
ChatGPT 5, Anthropic, Gemini. They all have hallucination rates anywhere between 40 to 47% of the time on
Mhm.
our most recent models. And this is an improvement from where they were just 2 months ago, where there
Mhm.
was hallucinations anywhere between 48% and 79% of the time.
Yes.
So let's sink in on that. If you
Hmm.
are a board member from a publicly traded company and you're a CEO from a publicly traded company, you know that you can't be in error for your quality of
Yes.
accuracy and for your product development. You can't be in error anywhere between 40 and 47% of the time and still have your customer base. All
Right.
right. So because the generative AI upon which the agentic is based is going to be moving in error because of the hallucination rates that our AI tool makers are being very transparent about and posting on their websites. And I'll drop some links for you guys to see this, for ChatGPT 5, page 12. It lays out the error rates that I've just explained to all of you. So
Yes.
governance, the trust framework that you and I are going to be teaching a lot of board members about. I'm excited
Yes.
for how we're kicking off with One R Institute to get
Yes.
this trust framework out. But the trust framework is what
Yes.
will balance out the frailties or the inconsistencies in the technology.
Yes. A fascinating fact. I follow Agentic AI, and I'm sure you saw Isabel Busquets' article in the Wall Street Journal. I view Isabel Busquets as a thought leader in AI, and she wrote about how Moderna is running about 3,200 AI agents. Moderna merged the chief technology officer and chief human resource officer roles into one. And they now view HR as expanded to manage the digital workforce and the human workforce. I'm just curious, given that the first concern is AI governance for agentic AI, and the second concern is AI governance for vendors, do you think that merging those two functions, merging those departments, is an effective step for addressing those top two concerns, governance with vendors and governance inside the enterprise?
Yeah, I think it's great to centralize these things because even though agentic AI doesn't have an employee badge, they are just as much a representative of your company as
Yeah.
an employee. So it makes
Yes.
a lot of sense for the
Yes.
HR department to be present. But listen, none of this will be effective unless trust is embedded into the AI tech stack itself. And this is how it
Mm-hmm.
happens. You need to embed the change management and the prompts for change management that need to occur in the company. That starts with the T for trust, which is triage. Uh,
Yes.
let's make sure on the agentic front that you
Mhm.
are using, I love Moderna's example, that you are in fact using agentic AI to solve problems and challenges in the company that are relevant to the strategic
Yes,
goals of the company. Okay.
yes,
Um, we come into companies all the time and see a bunch of projects, including agentic. And when we ask, where the CEO's strategy fits in, we see that these projects are very far away from the
yes.
three strategic goals that CEO has laid out to investors in the most recent earnings call, for example. Very common. So it's not, I would encourage everyone listening that you can have confidence to bring AI to the most ROI generating, strategic, important goals of the company and break off pieces of that are workflows that can be important for useful for AI with
Mhm,
confidence, because I'm going to talk to you about the rest
mhm,
of trust, which will give you that confidence. Uh, Part of the triage, just making sure you have the right AI agentic use case that really
mhm.
is going to drive the goals, either revenue, operations, or strategy for the company. Second part of triage is ensuring that you have a measurable ROI for that agent. What
Yes.
is what does success look like? And
Mhm,
that
mhm,
includes, you talked about the HR folks, but that also includes a conversation with the CFO. And so that's
mhm.
what I love about this trust framework is it forces us to break down silos and ensure that we are getting the right conversations with varied groups, and that includes the CFO and controller, to ensure that the AI that is being placed into this agentic category, actually there's a measurable return on the investment.
Yes, yes.
Assuming that's all in place and you've got the right AI agentic use case, then you
Mm,
want to say, what are our legal obligations? Uh,
mhm.
and how is this agentic, AI, how do we risk rank that? Think of that like an intersection and a stoplight.
Mhm,
There's a red light, we know to tap
mhm,
the brakes. Certain types of AI as a company or under legal frameworks will be prohibited in certain
mhm.
jurisdictions. In Canada, in Europe, etc. Things like agentic AI for social scoring, looking
Mhm,
at your customers' behavior and on websites and portals that are unrelated to you and making a decision about whether they'll be your
mhm.
customer or not. That is prohibited in many countries, including those in the EU and multiple jurisdictions around the world. Um, so what is your legal obligations? And then finally, how does this agentic AI fit in with your enterprise risk management? Is this
Mhm,
a risk that you are, as a company, able to tolerate? And are you ranking it as, the red light prohibited, or the
mhm.
green light it's okay to do? Or most agentic and most AI, generative AI projects in general, fall into this, yellow light category. Uh,
Yes.
it's safe to go into the intersection, but you need to use caution. And we're going to talk about what caution looks like when we get to the rest of the trust framework.
Yes. So I want to concern number 12. For some reason, what you just talked about brings to mind concern number 12 is board members, corporate officers are concerned about breaking down silos between legal, technical, and operational teams. And it's very interesting. And you and I have talked about it in the past. The Writer AI survey, which was done in partnership with a market research company, and there was a considerable press coverage in Axios, Wired, and Entrepreneur magazines. And 1,600 knowledge workers were surveyed, 800 of which were executives, and in businesses using generative AI. And they said, oh, the use of generative AI has created silos and wreaked havoc in our organizations. By contrast, Professor Ethan Mollick, who uses AI in his classes and in consulting. They did a controlled trial of AI, and in the R&D department, and I believe it was at Johnson and Johnson or Procter and Gamble. I apologize, I can't remember the company. It had the opposite effect. It broke down silos between the business teams and the R&D teams. What do you think is the difference? And I believe I have ideas about why there are differences, and I do believe it concerns governance. But how does the trust framework address breaking down silos between legal, technical, and financial and operational? And I do want to just note something interesting is that FASB standards, Financial Accounting Standards Board accounting standards, treat software and human capital expenses differently, and that's going to be part of the equation. But how do we break down those silos using the trust framework?
The great news is that companies that are using the trust framework are in the 5% that are seeing their AI enterprise use cases flourish, and
Yes.
that they are seeing returns on investment. I just dropped into the chat an article about the MIT
Yes.
study.
Yes.
It came out that 95% of our
Mhm.
enterprise AI is failing. And a big
Yes.
part of that is what you talked about is the human component.
Mm.
If the employees are not on board with trust, it's not going to happen. Your AI is not going to be successful. And not only is it not going to be successful as a project, but as I mentioned earlier with the emphasis study, it might actually cost you money
Mm.
in addition to everything else. The other thing I wanted to throw into all the other statistics that we've talked about, McKinsey recently came out with a report that said that 80% of our companies are seeing no financial impact, zero, no impact on earnings before
Mm.
interest and taxes whatsoever with the
Mm.
AI deployments after 2 years. So these are, time for introspection, right? But the good
Yes.
news is that you can prompt this with the trust framework. So we talked
Yes.
about the triage. Once you have you've got the right use cases and you know that you're ready to go, then working as a team to ensure that you have the right data to train your AI, whether it is agentic, it's going to go out and do a task, or it's generative and it's going to generate answers for you. You're going to need to make sure that you have what we call it the R in trust, the right data.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
means that your data is correct, for one thing, that you have the right
Yes.
things and you've taken the steps to clean that data, make sure that it's accurate. But in addition, and this is where the flywheel of working with people outside of your comfort zone. You talked about HR
Mhm.
and IT and legal getting together, which is wonderful. But
Mhm.
when you think about this for right data, you also need to make sure your training data that not only is it correct, but that you have rights for what you're training with.
Yes.
That you
Yes.
have IP rights,
Yes.
privacy rights, and business rights to train with that data. So in
Yes.
the hypothetical that you just discussed, that means the HR executive, the legal executive, and the IT executive are going to need to march over to the IP department and say, hey, do
Yes.
we have rights for this? Here is the data that we'd like to train with. Where are our rights here? With respect to privacy, probably someone on the privacy legal will know right away whether you have rights, privacy rights to train with the data that you are using, especially in healthcare, so important.
Mhm.
And then on the business rights, that's
Mm.
usually someone in the actual division. Let's just take the Moderna example. Depending on what tests were being done, there is a business unit that is responsible for that, and we'll know whether there are business rights. Do we get this data? Do we have permission from the healthcare provider? Do we have permission from the hospitals? Do we have permissions from the patients? Business rights to use this. Okay, so that
Yes.
right there, that example burst out. You were originally with 3 people on a team, and now we've already identified 5 or 6 that need to be contacted at a minimum to make sure that you have the right data to train. The U in trust is very important, and that is post training after the AI is already out, the agentic is working, the generative AI is starting in your company. That is just the beginning of the oversight that needs to occur. So there must be the U in trust, uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing to validate, say for agentic, that the AI is going to the sources that you
Yes.
have proved as a company. And so you need to hover over that. And that can be done either inside the agentic AI itself, built into the code, what I mean, the standards that you have for the accurate databases or the accurate
Yes.
websites to collect information, that can be actually coded into your agentic AI directly, or you can code those standards into an observability model.
Mm-hmm.
What's important for the board to know is that agentic AI and generative AI in general, it is not a set and forget situation. It's not that you
Mm-hmm.
train it and put it out there and just wait for great things to happen. Because 95% of companies that do it that way end up with an AI incident that's costly.
Mm-hmm.
The better thing to do is to actually have your teams go to
Mm-hmm.
the subject matter experts to find out what accuracy means in that particular AI use case, and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that that is coded in to the AI itself, so that UN trust is really critical. And let me give you an analogy that's outside of AI. I'm speaking to you today from Los Angeles, where I live, but I
Mm-hmm.
travel a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
when I'm in New York or DC or Canada, and my husband's not home either, I have sensors on my window from our burglar alarm company, which is ADT. And I'll know on any given day at any given time when the
Yes.
backside window is open, when my front door is open. I can see a video, I get a push notification, and I can see right away whether
Mm-hmm.
this is authorized activity or unauthorized. But just imagine if I didn't have a sensor on my window, I could come back from a month of travel and find someone, squatting in my living room and living there because I would
Mm-hmm.
have no idea whether the windows were opened or closed. It's the same thing with generative AI. Your teams and boards, it's important for you to understand this. Your technical teams will have no visibility into what the AI is doing because, as I mentioned, testing once a quarter or once a week will not catch
Yes.
fluctuations and errors at 50% rates that could happen at any minute of any given day. So you must have visibility. Your teams need visibility on it real time.
So I'm curious. So we talked about encoding accuracy, transparency, explainability, and other guardrails into the AI. And certainly the concerns, and I have specific examples, protecting IP rights, your trade secrets, protecting your software code, protecting your confidential business data, protecting against cyber attacks. And there's I'm sure you know about the famous issue with Samsung where probably employees with the very best of intentions or employees with great pressures for productivity tried to debug software code in a public AI. And that exposed the software code as a trade secret. And of course, that leads to loss of trade secret protection. So how can so do we create a super prompt in our large language models? How do boards know that if we go out and license Gemini or ChatGPT or Perplexity in our enterprise, how do we ensure that when our employees are interacting with generative AI or an AI agent, they're using a private version and our inputs are not being used as training data? And simultaneously addressing the issue of shadow AI, because we know that a certain percentage of employees are purchasing AI out of their own pocket due to productivity pressures in the enterprise. How do we get those guardrails in through the trust framework?
So this is such an important question, and it goes into the S in trust, which is supervision. And I'll also say that could double for storytelling. I
Yeah.
find it really effective when we go in and train a board or a senior leadership team to
Yes.
explain what the repercussions are of this. And we also have partners in our trust coalition. Bonar Institute is one of them. SAPA is another that will train the employees at all levels, um, uh, from the CEO all the way down to the first, new hire, that they're trained on the trust framework and the repercussions. So let's just give a couple of examples of what happens. So as you mentioned with Samsung, an employee wanting to do the best that they could suddenly put in sensitive product information, and competitors of Samsung were able to just type in what's their next phone going to be and
Yes.
created
Mm.
competitive products that hurt the business for
Yes.
that reason. So when you're, that's really important to share those kinds of stories, like the
Yes.
Samsung one. Another one, Rite Aid, is just, you know,
Mm.
had to seek bankruptcy protection because its vendors' AI was misidentifying paying customers as criminals. And so what that resulted in is, you know, sometimes loyalty card members were walking within the physical store and were followed by security agents and escorted out because the algorithm was prompting the security team to look for
False
particular
positive.
false positives. And that actually created an FTC investigation against Rite Aid, multiple class actions, but just leaving aside the business part of it and the litigation part, think about the customer relationship when loyalty
Mm.
customers are being branded as criminals in your system. So one of the things that Rite Aid was faulted for was not continuously testing, monitoring, and auditing
Mm.
the AI of their vendor. How would they do that? Well, they have physical security guards in stores. Just think about our trust framework. If someone had gone to those security guard supervisors and said, what are the indicia of criminal activity in our stores? What do you
Hmm.
follow on the day-to-day? When will you follow a customer through the store? Those security guards could tell you very quickly, we look for suspicious activity when they're bent over inventory, etc. And that could have been coded into the AI itself so that when the AI started deviating from that and started following loyalty customers that were walking to the aisle to pay, that could have been the trigger to the company to go, the supervising humans to jump in and take those are the S interests, to jump in and get the T interest, the last T, technical documentation, logging data and metadata of the uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing, and of the training data, and get the model back on track, rather than thousands of people of loyalty customers being misidentified and the company having to go seek bankruptcy protection because of that. Another example,
Mm.
the state of Tennessee, okay,
Mhm.
had a trustworthy AI group. They hired a major Fortune, one of the top four consulting
Yes.
companies, to develop an algorithm to distribute Medicare and Medicaid benefits. They spared no expense, $400 million to get this right. And only to have this time last year, a judge rule that the AI could not be used because it was denying sometimes life sustaining Medicare and Medicaid
Yes.
procedures in error 92% of the time. So, taking a step back, how could trust have prevented that? Well, we know in the US what the Medicare and
Mm.
Medicaid claims processing standards are. They're codified in regulation.
Yes.
If in uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing post deployment, if those standards had been coded into the AI itself,
Mhm. Mhm.
well, the consultant and the caring state, both of which had amazing, trustworthy AI teams,
Mhm.
would have had supervising humans, S's, alerted to the deviations, and they could have pulled the technical documentation and get the model back on track instead of tens of thousands of people losing life-sustaining care. And not only that, the state being enjoined and prevented from using the AI that they spent $400 million on. It
Yes.
was also not great for the consultants to have
Yes.
their names smeared through all of these various litigation papers. Um,
Absolutely.
Over and over, I mean, as we've said, the 1,500 people that responded to the emphasis report just last week, 95% of them have their companies have AI incidents. McDonald's, their McHire app, chatbot to take resumes in for applicants, a great thing that went for all the franchisees, and their
Mhm.
vendor Perplex AI, had a situation where there was a vulnerability and 64 million applications, resumes, socials, and so forth became available. Okay.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
that's the type of thing
Mm.
that with trust would not happen. And that's what we need to get to so that we can learn from these
Yes.
errors that have
Yes.
happened and to take a little bit of proactive activity, doesn't slow down innovation at
Mhm.
all to add these things. In fact, the testing, it happens, we've seen consultants put in continuous testing with the guardrails that the client gives in a matter of weeks. So there is no reason for
Yes.
companies to be facing a nine-figure exposure when this is preventable.
We have a very interesting question, and it leads to another question I'd like to add as follow-up. So David Kimball has asked, what is the U in trust? And I'd like to expand that. Can you perhaps put in the chat feature a link to the trust framework? I think people will find that helpful. But what is the letter U in the trust framework?
It stands for uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing post-deployment. So
Yes.
just like a sensor on a window when you're not home that is in the background, and the safe, accurate state is for the window to be closed when you're traveling. Uh, you don't have to have, I don't have to stay at my house and hover over my window to make
Yes.
sure the sensor is working. It's just there. But if there is a deviation from what is supposed to be accurate when I'm not home, I get an alert and I know to close, check my video. And if it's a criminal, I'm going to let the police come over. But otherwise, I know to get a neighbor to close the window if, our children left the window open or something like that. Okay. It's the same thing with
Yes.
AI. Uninterrupted testing
Mhm.
means that, again, bursting through silos, your company, your AI governance team reaches out and finds out, okay, what is the IP that we need to protect in our company? And with this AI use case, and what IP do we not want to generate as output because we have litigious neighbors that want to sue us all the time? And there's someone in the intellectual property department who will be able to answer that question in 5 seconds for you. That answer becomes your
Yes.
IP test that gets coded into the AI itself and runs in the background so that if suddenly the AI starts generating, say for a marketing use case, your arch competitor's logo, for which
Mhm.
they have already sued you, the supervising humans can be alerted to that and fix the model. Are you with me?
So
Um,
human in the loop oversight.
well, the human in the loop gets alerted,
Yes.
but it's technical and technology
Ah, so
that
yes, yes.
embeds the test.
Mhm.
So, but
Mhm.
humans provide the test, and then
Yes.
it has to be actually coded into the AI itself. So, where should you be testing? There's 7 areas that the legal frameworks call for in the EU, for example, but they're also good business for you guys to adopt proactively, whether or not you're subject to the EU AI Act. Things like IP rights, privacy, cyber, health and safety,
Mhm.
accuracy, bias, and if
Mhm.
the company is big enough, antitrust. You can get those tests for, what is, it depends on the various use cases, but just think of an AI use case right now that might be happening in your company. Let's call it for a marketing use case or a customer service use case. Well, there's a customer service supervisor. They're going to have an accuracy test about this is the way we talk to our customers at our company. Here are
Mhm.
the do's, but most importantly, here are the don'ts. We don't
Mhm.
yell at our customers. We don't do this. All of
Yes.
those don'ts need to be coded in as your tests into the AI itself
Mhm.
because AI will drift otherwise.
Mhm.
And that's where hallucination comes from, something called model drift, that it
Mhm.
will degrade and drift over time. A perfect example, the logistics company, and some of you have heard me, I see Shepard on, she's heard this story before, but one of our logistics companies was using AI as a chatbot to respond to customer questions about their packages, worked perfectly for 18 months. People would type in their codes and then the
Yes.
AI would come back with your package will be arriving in 2 days, etc. It worked beautifully. Suddenly, one day, a customer typed in their code, asked the question, when will my package arrive? And suddenly the chatbot started cursing out the customer,
Wow.
criticizing the company as being the worst logistics company in the world,
Mm, mhm. Mhm.
blamed the company for leaving the customer, firing all the real human customer services employees and leaving the customer with this quote unquote useless chatbot. Uh,
Amazing.
I'm paraphrasing because this went on for a while, uh,
Wow.
to the point where the consumer took a video of this and didn't. The first thing the consumer did wasn't to just put the company on blast on social media, but rather sent the video to the email address that was near the chatbot that the company had put there and said, look, here's the cursing I did receive. Here's the criticism of your company. Pretty sure you don't want that and want you to be aware. No one responded to that email because it wasn't a monitored email for crisis. It was just, contact us at blank. So it
Yes.
just, you know, uh, missed the radar screen. So 48 hours later, the customer was on X. We have a 2.2 million viral views, a
Yeah.
BBC time, and then global coverage, Time Inc., etc. Stock impacts, all of that totally preventable had the customer service supervisor's criteria for no-nos been coded into the AI itself. Therefore, just imagine the supervising humans at DPD would have been alerted up. Our AI is cursing at our customers
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
imagine the outreach they could have made. Hey, here's when your package is coming. We're
Hmm.
experimenting with our chatbot. We're going to go fix our chatbot right now.
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
think you would have seen a viral 2.2 million views and stock
That's
dip. I
right.
think
That's
would have
right.
been mitigated right there on the spot.
AIGP governance expert Kyle David has made a comment, which is a question, and it's a question of mine. So, OECD, Stanford, MIT, several organizations purport to have an AI incidents database that tell these stories that we can learn from. Dominique, what are the best places where people like Kyle and board members or chief AI officers can go to learn about these case studies in a convenient way?
Yeah, so it's we keep a track on a number of things in our
Yes,
proprietary database. We have over 1 million unique weighted attributes where we
yes,
have, reverse engineered what's worked and what's not worked, and where, frankly, the trust framework could be helpful. And we haven't seen a situation yet where the proactive steps that I talked about wouldn't be a way to protect. I like for areas of incidents. There's Microsoft has a blog of good events that have happened, AI powered success stories. There's Google has a blog as well. The Algorithmic Justice League over at Stanford, they have a series of AI incidents. The ones that you mentioned have a number of AI incidents. I'd also encourage people to sign up for our newsletter at globaldatainnovation.com. We send out a newsletter for CEOs and board members twice a week. And I would say, uh, in our database with over 1 million unique weighted attributes, we have probably 2/3 of the incidents, unfortunately, are negative. We're not looking for, only bad incidents, but there's so much of them that are unfortunate incidents that you can learn from. But I think you can also take a look at the emphasis survey that I shared, which just came out a couple weeks ago, I think on August 14th. They outline a number of high level trends that you could look at to prevent these issues. But the bottom line is the trust framework is really a roll up of all of these various incidents, like what could prevent a company from having those, and then also a roll up of the various legal
mhm,
frameworks as well
mhm.
as regulatory, and then just other frameworks out there like NIST and OECD guidance and UN.
Yes.
And we just rolled it all up to the 5 steps, the TRUST that can keep you from being one of these stories that I'm telling today.
Yes. And I want to say, I personally post Monday through Friday on the Bonner Institute's LinkedIn page. I don't always cover an incident, but you could follow that page. And we also have our newsletter, the Bonner Bulletin. And I hope we align more, given our partnership, we can align more of the content. And Kyle, I'll separately email you about the resources I know about. So there's another board concern that I'm very passionate about. So my law firm partners and I are going to conduct a vendor contract training workshop for procurement and chief information security officers, and we're going to cover AI risks. And one of the areas is we're covering is actually concern number 13, build a shared language for AI leadership, and so that boards and management know their role. And in contracting, as you know, I might, I need to align my contract definitions with like maybe HIPAA, or maybe FTC, or Colorado AI Act, or EU AI Act, or ISO standards. And so, how do you build a shared language? I've worked in very large corporations where there's a complete disconnect between how a board member defines a term, even AI, versus someone in IT. How do we address that? How do we build that shared language, not only for legal and regulatory purposes, but to enable innovation, to enable responsible governance?
So, first of all, that's such a great question. And I remember when I was training in New York, a board member, one of the board chairs, was listening to an AI governance conversation very similar to what we're having here. And there was another speaker, and we were around a kind of a board-like table with various folks in New York. And I guess we were on the 51st floor of a beautiful building, uh, kind of looking out onto the water and right around Wall Street. But the bottom line is he was just so frustrated after listening for a while. I said, okay, what kind of AI governance are we talking about? Because you're using the word governance, and this sounds like management stuff.
Yes,
And I'm thinking of AI governance differently as a board chair. And so can we just
yes,
align, please, on language? And I went up to
yes,
him afterwards and I go, I hear your frustration. And that's another big reason that we came up with the trust framework. Because what we saw was legal was talking about AI governance using all of, the EU AI Act alone is 375 pages, let alone,
yes,
as you mentioned, Colorado, Texas, the automated guidelines coming out in California, New York, et cetera. So there's a very detailed
yes.
legal language. And then
Mm,
when we think about AI governance for, the chief technology officer or the chief innovation officer or chief data strategy officer, they're looking at revenue generation
yes,
and goals. And AI governance is about, do we have the right data to train so that we can get to a place where we have ROI for these various AI use cases? And the CEO is similar to that, but looking at broader revenue trends and making sure that the strategic goals of the company and the revenue generation from AI is happening in alignment. And so you have, when the CEO might be getting advice from McKinsey, and the lawyers, outside counsel, such as yourself, actually, John, are advising the legal team. And then the CTO might be working with Accenture or Deloitte or PwC. And then you've got others, the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, is concerned about protecting system and is working with their, consultants. And so ultimately, you have an AI governance meeting with, eight stakeholders, and you really have 16 eight in the room and six other consultants that are speaking in six different languages, a lot of it really deep and frankly not necessary to get to the 5% of companies that are excelling with their AI. You need a shared language where you can all speak and understand, generally from the board's perspective, that trust should be happening. So from a trust standpoint, they don't need to go and embed, the categories for right data in the R in trust, but they do need to ask the question, hey, are we triaging our AI? How are we doing to make sure that our AI aligns with our strategy? That's a triage question. Boards can ask, what are we doing to train our data and to make sure that we are using accurate data? Do we know the answer to that question? For the U and trust, boards need to know that there should be uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing, because the underlying generative AI that the application that the company is building is sitting on top of shifting sands of error rates of anywhere between 40 and 47%. So the board doesn't need to be a technologist. The board just needs to say, hey, how are we dealing with uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing, given the fluctuations that might be happening all over the internet and what we're building on top of? Who are our supervising humans that are going to fix the model and be alerted when it deviates from our standards? That's a question a board can ask. That's a question a CEO can ask. And hey, once those supervising humans are alerted to deviations from our standards, are they going to have the technical documentation they need to fix our model ASAP? Because this is really important, that the board is speaking in alignment with what the engineers that are building the applications are doing, and that legal, you're going to go much deeper into, the in the T and trust in terms of aligning with legal requirements. That's a
Mhm.
whole legal risk assessment, and there's at least 1,000 pages of regulatory laws in various global jurisdictions that are already on the table, and they're linked to my website at globaldatainnovation.com under global framework. So obviously, the chief technology officer, the CEO, and the board are not going to burrow into that level of detail. But the key here is these 5 things that we've discussed, this shared language of trust, and these 5 steps we discussed will be enough to keep a company off of a negative headline, like we discussed with McDonald's earlier this month, and the state of Tennessee just last year, and et cetera. Okay, so that's what if we can align on that language, then you can still go deep with your own teams in the verbiage that makes sense for you. But for purposes of moving an AI project forward, and that's why 95%, I dropped into the chat the MIT study, 95% of these AI projects are failing. They're not even making it out of pilot because of this gridlock, because of this paralysis, and then an error occurs and no one knows how to fix it. And then rather than get into a proactive stance, they throw out all the old AI use cases and start working on brand new ones, again, throwing money out of the door, creating new, fresh incidents that are costing more money to the company. So we've got to turn this pattern around and get to great AI and get all these companies flip the script. So we're 95% of the companies are doing great with their AI and 5% are having problems, rather than the current stat now.
I would like to invite members of our audience to unmute and ask questions, or feel free to type in a question in the chat feature. I do my best to monitor the chat feature. I always have more questions, and I wish we could had another hour, Dominique, because you're bringing so many ideas and questions and discussion points. I belong to an innovation community. It's called the Innovation Institute for Innovation in Large Organizations. I'm an advisor to it, and several innovation consultants are now actually benefiting from hallucinations, because the hallucinations in AI that are sometimes creating problems in terms of brainstorming ideas, the emergent behavior, the hallucination is actually brainstorming ideas for innovating new products and services, expanding to a new geography. How do we handle that double-edged sword of hallucinations, which in one context can be a benefit and another context is a harm?
Yeah, I think about this all the time when I think of Shayla. A couple of years ago, grandmother back was hurting. No,
Yes.
doctors could not figure out what was going on.
Mhm.
Her husband had an AI company, took her x-rays through it, and yeah, lo and behold, they discovered early stage lung cancer. She was able to be operated on, treated early, and she's now 18 months later, cancer-free, spending a lot of time with her grandchildren. And that is an example of hallucination or drift and correlation that leads to
Yes.
a great result. The way we control this so it's not a crapshoot, that you're getting hallucinations that are delighting your company with results, or you're getting the next hallucination that discloses 64 million of your employee records. The way to do that is by proactive planning with you in trust with the standards that are acceptable to the company. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
therefore, if hallucination is happening in all kinds of ways that is delightful, that's great. That can occur. But if it's cursing out your customers, You're alerted to that because you put that standard in and you can go in and correct the model. Is everybody with me? Because there is a standard that your company has already for the AI use cases that are being contemplated, because usually AI is only doing what humans were doing earlier. So whatever you were telling your employees to do in terms of standards, that's what needs to be coded in. The no-nos need to be coded into your AI. And
Yes.
then you can hallucinate to your heart's consent.
Yes. In our remaining 5 minutes, we have to do more fireside chats, Dominique. We just do. There's so much. I present often to the Chief Human Resource Officer community, and one of the topics we discuss is generative AI and agentic AI will be training not only on written and verbal communications, but also the implicit culture and the decisions of the organization. And if you have a toxic culture, AI is going to train on the toxicity and amplify that back. How does leadership address the toxic culture? If you just bring AI in and it's training on toxic versus an organization that has a healthy culture, and I think they're going to be the winner. How do you turn around that toxic culture and bring in AI? How do you leverage the trust framework in that context?
Yeah, so there again, the R in trust in terms of the right data, not training on what it is that is going on in the culture, but what you're aspiring to have happen,
Yes.
right? Like the change management, that becomes the right data that you train with. And then
Yes.
there's got to be some examples of employees doing it well, collaborating together, not attacking each other, whatever the toxicity is. There's got to be a few at least that are not doing it that way. And then you can
Yes.
supplement with other external data where you're modeling the behavior that you want, and that's the right data. But then to make sure that you're reinforcing it, because as you mentioned, with the toxicity in certain environments, the U in trust can really help, because your uninterrupted testing, monitoring, and auditing on accuracy says, all right, it's not accurate for our colleagues to yell at each other. All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if the AI is being used to send nasty notes to each other, you can decide what the verbiage is that you don't want to have happen with employees, and that is your no-no. So then supervising humans are alerted when employees are engaged in toxic activity and can step in and conduct
Mm-hmm.
additional training and level up. But again,
Yes.
the theme here is control
Mm-hmm.
the AI, not
Mm-hmm.
be a conveyor belt to whatever happens, because
Yes.
otherwise, whatever happens often is the 95% of companies that Infosys just noted have, on average, 800,000 in AI incidents that have occurred.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank you. We have 2 minutes left. I do hope we can have more fireside chats in the future. I do want to note to everyone, we will have the recording available within 2 days. At the Bonner Institute, we always have more people viewing the recordings than are able to actually attend. We will be sending emails out with links to newsletters and other resources discussed. And thank you all for participating today. Dominique, this has been fantastic. My mind is spinning from all the ideas and information. It's just been absolutely delightful, and I'm looking forward to more in the future. Thank you very much for sharing all your insights today.
Thank you so much, John, and I really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next time.
Fantastic. Be well.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone.